Okay, we have the alternate storyline of Hunter x Hunter. And what does this mean? We have Kurapika as the main character now. So Kurapika being the main character, Kurapika Kurta grew up in the Kurta clan. His clan was cool, you know. He had a mom, dad, brothers and sisters. One day, spiders came through, two of them, and just ran through his people. Kurapika was the only one that survived the incident. And because of this, he had hatred in his heart a little bit. He needed to get revenge on the spiders. So eventually, he went into the hunter exam, you know, like we see in the original story, right? And he meets Gon, and he's like, Gon is a kid. He might be interesting, but he sees Leorio, and he's like, oh, well, this guy has a good head on his shoulders. Probably, you know, he's caused some principles and virtues, and is a good guy all around. I could probably talk to him. But upon talking to him, he's like, oh, shit, this guy's kind of childish a little bit. You know, a little bit. You know, and he has, you know, ambitions towards money, but I don't know what, you know, he needs some money for. And then, Gon is like, you know, this boy who, man, he's really in tune with nature and how, like, birds move, and he can smell when the storm's coming and shit like that. You know, survival skills are high with this boy. And he's like, okay, you know, I could learn a thing or two from this kid. And then he gets into the exam and he's like, okay, Killua, this boy drank this, you know, juice and, you know, informed us that it was, you know, poisonous. But he guzzled that down like it was nothing. I don't know what this boy's been raised in, but shit, this kid is not normal. Then he becomes friends with these guys. And, you know, they run through the exam together. However, when they're going through the exam together, what happens is Hisoka finds Gon and Killua, and he's going to attack. But then Kurapika comes with those batons, and he awakens like a prerequisite for Nen. He's basically kind of making the batons harder with like one of the prerequisites. So he's doing that. And then Hisoka's like, oh, damn, this guy is not who I was trying to fight against. After that, he's like, okay, I'll retreat for now. But, you know, if those kids are ever alone, you know, I'm going to. And then Kurapika makes a vow to, like, be there for Gon and Killua. You know, I won't let this guy, you know, grab the guys. So then he does that. He's like, okay. After a while, they get to the end of the Hunter exams, towards the end. And he's in the review with Isaac Netero. And he asks Netero, he's like, hey, do you know of any of the spiders, the Phantom Troop? And he's like, oh, I can't answer that question. I'm not knowledgeable in that organization, that crime syndicate. But you, young man, have a good, you know, prospects of being a great hunter. And he says shit like that. And Kurapika's like, damn. And he just like keeps on moving, and he's like, okay. He gets to the, okay, he fights against Illumi in a match, and he's like, Gichiraka is, you know, gonna be easy to beat. He takes the needles out of his head, and he's like, I'm not Gichiraka, boy. You see that kid with the white hair over there? That's my brother. And you? Are you playing with my brother? And you know, Illumi's about to be like, I can't kill you, but I will help you up. And Ahsoka's just standing there like, you know, I was about to do the same thing the other day. But, you know, Kurapika's fighting against Illumi a little bit. And then Killua was like, you know, just quit the match now. That's my brother. He'll kill you. Just do it. And then Killua just jumps in the way. And he's like, kill, what are you doing? And then, and then Isaac Netter was like, and he's like, no, and then Killer was like, no, 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 I'll leave. You know, and then Illumi's just like, oh my God, I guess I'm done too. After further, discussings of shit, they still gave Illumi his thing because why? He would have probably killed, or not killed Kurapika, but let him, had him in, a near death state. But Kilo jumping in the way and saying that got him disqualified, and then he left. He didn't have to kill Botaro this time, right? Gon still got his, and they went to, the Zoldyck Mansion, all that shit played out. But then he goes to Heaven's Arena with Gon and Killua because he's like, I need to protect you from Ahsoka. And he's like, oh, we don't need the help. But then he still goes there. So Wing actually ends up teaching Kurapika how to use Nen. Then he awakens as the chain user. I forget. And I do forget what Nen type he uses. I think he's a conjurer, though, right? So he then but he ain't fighting in the tournament. He's more focused on a Nen master being Wing. And he's like, teach me everything you know about Nen. Everything, because I need to hunt down these troop members. And he's like, okay, I'll teach you everything I know. And he's like, I know that, with the road to revenge can lead to da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, I don't teach me everything you know. And he's like, I will. It teaches him the basics, and then he awakens as a conjurer. And then Gon and Killua are like, oh my God, that's cool. And they continue on, and they do their thing. Gon fights against Ahsoka, even though Kurapika wasn't there. Kurapika was worried, and he was about to hop down there and, enter, but then, Ahsoka, he let off a little bit. After that, we get to York New City, right? York New City, Kurapika is now one of these bodyguards for the Nostrad family. Gon and Killua are there to look for Greed Island. He is confronted by Ahsoka after he's, run down with the Nostrads. They're like, protect my daughter. And he's like, I'll protect her from any of the spiders. I'm your guy for that. That's why I'm here. And he's like, well, we can trust you then. And then Kurapika is approached by Ahsoka, and Ahsoka's like, guess what? I'm in the Phantom Troop. And he's like playing games with them and shit, knowing that Kurapika ain't as powerful. But then, Kurapika shows his eyes, and he's like, I'm not afraid to, challenge you now, so calm the fuck down. If you're trying to be like them, you might get killed yourself, saying shit like that. And he's like, well, that's yet to be seen, but, I know the members. And he's like, you got to tell me where the big guy is. He's talking about Uvugi and the guy with the katana, because they were the ones who ran through his village. So then, then the craziest shit happens, right? So basically, Kurapika runs a 1v2 with Nobunaga and Uvugi. He puts the chains on Uvugi, and he's fighting Uvugi first. But then, before they could take root or whatever, Nobunaga got there, and he's like, "Hey man, what's going on? You're fighting the chain user." And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "This guy wants to get revenge." And he's like, "Let's go at him." But then Kurapika has a new chain, right? He can basically control people's actions with it, And he wraps Nobunaga in one of these chains, and he's like, "Oh fuck," And he starts swinging on Uvugi and shit. And Uvugi, he's getting cut by Nobunaga, and he's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And he's like, "I can't control my body, you know, stop me however you can." And then he kicks him, and then Kurapika's still moving his body, around. But this is a high activation cost, right? So Kurapika's getting tired. Uvagin gets pissed, and he's like, "I turn the tables on the people who try to come and get revenge." Boom! And he breaks his arm. But then Kurapika gets back up, and he's standing there with red eyes and shit, right? And he's still about that fucking life, right? Nobunaga's like, "Oh shit!" He already knows he's done because he has that dagger on his chest, and he's like, "Tell me what happened that night." And he's like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Don't play dumb with me. You better answer." And he's like, he didn't answer, so he then died. And then Uvagin was like, "No!" And then he gets grabbed up too, and he gets killed. But after that, he passes out there, and then in the morning, Ahsoka wakes him up, and he's like, "Guess what? You killed 2 Phantom Troop members. You're catching up to me, which is still not there yet." And he's like, "I don't know. We'll see." But he was still kind of like fatigued. A few days pass, and they're like, Uvagin and Nobunaga didn't show up. And the rest of the troop members are like, where the fuck are they? Gon and Killua get taken. Kurapika saves Gon and Killua from Crollo Lucifer, right? And he tells them, he's like, "Guess what? You're gonna not fuck with these boys, and you're gonna answer my questions." Ahsoka then tries to save Crollo, and he's like, "Guess what? You can do that, but I need my fun too, Kurapika. You can't have Crollo like that. He's my opponent. He's a worthy opponent for me." Kurapika's like, "I'm not. This is my fucking he's like, I have to deal with this guy, and now I have to fucking deal with you." And Gon and Killua would come there, and Lyra is like, "Just let him go." And then he takes away his Nen though. You know, his Nen still gets taken from him, turned off, and they need to find an exorcist. But Kurapika was kind of pissed, but then he was like, "Well, I did get my revenge already." He goes to Greed Island with Gon and Killua. Gon and Killua hop into the game with Kurapika, Tezcara's team, right? But they're there to help Gon out, right? Figuring that game out. Kurapika fights against Genthru. He chains Genthru up, and then Gon finishes him off with the Jaja Ken. Boom. Then we get to the part where Razor shows up. Now they have 4 people going against Razor instead of just 3. And Ahsoka and Gon, Killua, and Kurapika. Kurapika then confronts Ahsoka afterwards, and he's like, "Are you still trying to go after Crollo?" He's like, "Well, yes, but I understand that, they're looking for an Nen exorcist right now. So I ain't looking for him anymore. I came into this game to find somebody." He's like, "Well, I'm protecting Gon and Killua from the likes of you." And he's like, "Well, I'm friends with them. I'm friends with them." And he's like, "Yeah, but if you get too close to them, you can fucking, get these chains. Not in a good way." He's like, "Okay, well, we'll see about that." Then, next time, or the next arc, Chimera Antarc, he ain't with Gon and Killua yet. See, he's with Knuckle and Shoot. And Morrow, because Bisky goes to that town that they were in, and Morrow's like, he heard about what happened with Kite and all that shit. All that shit still goes down, and Gon and Killua come back, and they're all traumatized and shit. And he's like, "Are you guys all right?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're fine." And they're more powerful and shit. Gon showcases his powers to Morrow, and they're like, "We got 3 young, we got 3 lions going into the NGO with us. That boy with the fucking fist, the boy with the lightning, and the boy with the crit eyes. They will need them against these, monsters and shit. And he's like, the fucking royal guard members are powerful, but the king ain't even born yet. They got to the NGL and they're fighting these monsters. Oh my god. So basically, during this time, right, Isaac Nedero's called into, action. Zeno's called into action. What ends up happening is Isaac Netero is, sent somewhere else with Merwin, and that shit goes down the same way. But Merwin basically dies there. He don't go back to, Komugi. Yeah. She was waiting for him and shit to come back. But guess what? Everything happens basically similarly. Gon still need to get his revenge on P2, right? Boom. That happens. Killua fights against UP for a little bit with knuckle bind and shoot. However, when that happens, Kurapika goes to find Shia LaPouf. Shia LaPouf tried to get away, but even though Shia LaPouf tried to get away, he got chained up, and Kurapika was in a tough fight with him, but he was able to actually kill Shia LaPouf. Which wouldn't originally happen in the anime, right? He wasn't powerful enough, but this Kurapika's been with them through everything, and he's actually approaching Hisoka's level, and even, getting to past him. He grew his net ability. He could actually, withstand some of that, the taxation on his life, right? He's getting better at using his net, right? So he's able to take it down with, chain jail and, all that. It was still an extreme battle, though, and he was able to come out that alive. And they found Killua found him, and he's like, Gon's almost dead, and now you're almost dead too. What the hell are you guys doing? I'm the only one out here still fucking breathing. And UP was like basically, all alone. He actually gave his life up to bring Merwin back to life. That's actually what happened. He got to where Merwin was, and he brings Merwin back to life. But Merwin still has those, um, he has that connection to Komugi, and he's like, it's not it brings him back long enough so he could, do that shit with Komugi, play that last game, and then he just dies there. He dies kind of like oof. He just dies there, right? And then the next chairman starts to be selected, and Gon is in comatose, right? And he's barely alive. And then Kurapika or Killua goes to get Alaka, right? And Nanika, to save Gon. And then Kurapika's over there watching Zodiac and everything. He's like, I need to be on their level. I need to become one of the Zodiac members. And I need to find the rest of these Kurtais. Because I have some of them in my possession. But this ain't enough. And I need to kill the rest of the Phantom Troop members too. And do the world a service that way. He watches the chairman selection. He's like, Leorio, you're there, but you don't even want to be there. And he's like, yeah, but I want to still rally people to go help Gon. He's a hunter just like everybody here. He's a young hunter too. We need to make sure our boy's all right. And he's like, well, damn, at least you're doing that. Our friend does need help right now. And he's like, okay. He's there, and then he witnesses the shit with, Nanika and everybody does. And he's like, well, I don't know what that power was. Gon's back. And he was happy about it. But then other things happen. But unfortunately, y'all, this is where the story ends. and it just ends, right? Because the manga is ongoing, but we ain't up to date with that. And also, the manga is still ongoing. I didn't say that the manga was over with and they haven't adapted it. The manga is still being made. So therefore, we have the story of, or the alternate storyline where Kurapika gets to be the main character. He never quite reached like the Zodiac level, but almost. Like he was like approaching that type of like power, and like he was actually admiring Gene Freaks a little bit. Not admiring him, but like wondering about his power. Not like how he treats Gon, but like why would he like do shit like that and like avoid his son? Is he actually like that powerful? Um, but he got pretty powerful. We'll say that this Kurapika got to a 92, high 91, 91.9. Like he's like almost on Zeno's level, right? Power. Zeno's over there. But be cool, on the corner, and let me know what you thought about this alternate storyline with Kurapika as the main character, Hunter x Hunter.